This illustration deals with remote control signaling and power limited circuit conductors. Now, of course, 240.4G in conjunction with table 240.4G would allow these conductors to be protected with a larger size overcurrent device. So one of the things that we should review when we are applying table 430.72B as in boy. Let's review in the service equipment to the left of the illustration, the 45 amp 3-pole breaker. Routed through fuses now that are sized to allow that motor to start and run. That's important. Now, notice if we review in the boxed in information starting with step 1, the number 14 conductor that is listed as the control circuit that's run remote to the start and stop station, it's worth 20 amps to us because we're allowed to use the 60-degree column. So number 14 is good for 20 amps. And then notice in the second step, and the table 430.72B has a note below it that gives us a 300% rule. But what you must realize, if you're remotely routed with those conductors to stop stations, start stations, say pressure switches, flow switches, steam switch, whatever type of item that's being used to activate your switch or for control. And then notice you take the 300% now of 15 amps. You know, that's kind of the rating of that overcurrent device. And when we review the 300% rule, 45 amps. Now, what size is that overcurrent device in the service equipment? 45 amps. Now, that means the control circuits can be protected by 45 amps or less, but would 45 amp overcurrent device allow the motor to start and run? And if that wasn't the case, then we could size the fuse to allow the motor to start and run and use a fusible type disconnect. But the main thing, it's very difficult to use the 45 amp protective device to allow that. So usually that 45 amp overcurrent device may be sized up as high as 150 amp overcurrent device at 3 times its rating to allow a motor to start and run. So in other words, if it was a 150 amp overcurrent device, we know that circuit breakers will basically hold 3 times their rating at 600 volts or less, applying the rule of thumb method. So 3 times 150 would be 150 amps, and the number of seconds it would hold would be based upon the frame size, naturally, and it would allow the motor to start. Now, if you went to the fuses, then you could size the fuses in a size that would allow the motor to start at 5 times their rating, if that was possible. But if you could not get below or get at 45 amps or below with the fuses in the disconnect using time delay fuses that would hold 5 times their rating, then we would have to put a fuse block inside that controller, say, where the controller permits, and fuse those conductors, number 14, at 15 amps, and we'd be okay to reroute remotely. Now, this is not an illustration that shows the stop and start buttons on the cover of the magnetic starter. This illustration shows a remote run, and the overcurrent device cannot exceed 45 amps for the control circuit conductors to be considered protected. We need another stage of protection, and that's what this figure 9-12 is illustrating.